Hey everybody. So today we're going to talk some more about trauma in the natal chart. People seem to like this. Maybe like is the wrong word. I don't think anybody likes trauma. But people seem to be responsive to this. So and I wasn't done. I mean, I have to make these videos like 15 minutes now. So I wasn't done with all the places that you can look at to find trauma in the natal chart. I already went through Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and Pluto and Chiron. I went through those, but there are some other places too that you can look at to find trauma in the natal chart. Now, again, though, like with the other video, I'm not necessarily saying that you'll always have trauma with Neptune, or you'll always have, you know what, like I'm not, usually there's something with Pluto. I will say that. Usually there's something with Pluto, because Pluto can be looked at kind of like the South Node is looked at. So there usually is trauma with Pluto. There usually is something going on with Pluto. We all have trauma. We all have something. We all have our shit. But I'm not necessarily saying that there's trauma universally with all of these that I'm about to talk about, or that I talked about last time. There's usually also trauma with Chiron, because of what Chiron is. But just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not necessarily saying that you'll have trauma with every single thing that I'm talking about, that I bring up. But if you feel like you have trauma that you need to work through, if you feel like there is trauma from this lifetime or from a previous one, these are some other places that I would look. Okay, so first we'll start out with, and I didn't go into these last time, we'll start out with the South Node. There's the card for it. Like with Pluto, there usually is trauma with Pluto. There usually is trauma with the South Node. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like earth-shakingly devastating trauma. Not necessarily. But I guess I mean more like trauma in terms of there was something that you wanted to work beyond. Move beyond with the South Node. That's where the idea of trauma comes in. Depending on where your South Node falls by sign and house, and where the planetary ruler of the South Node falls by sign and house, will give you an idea as to kind of what kind of trauma we're talking about here, that you need to move beyond, what kind of things you need to move beyond with the South Node. Really, the ideal thing here is to learn how to balance between the North and the South Nodes, right? Balance the energies. But there usually is hang-ups or trauma that needs to be worked to move beyond, worked through to move beyond with the South Node. Another thing with trauma in the South Node, if you happen to have a planet conjunct the South Node, that planet, what it expresses, what it needs to express, the sign it falls in, how it needs to express it, the house where. This also might tie in trauma or something that you need to work through as well, since it does tie in with your previous lifetime story. And if you're not comfortable with the idea of past lifetimes, you can just think of it as something that you bring into this lifetime, just coming into this lifetime with this kind of trauma or something you need to work through. So if you have a planet conjunct the South Node, you'd also want to look at that planet. And it could be any planet, you know, we could talk about any planet here, not just the planets I talked about last time. Same thing with the squares. If you got a square to the South Node, that means you've also got a square to the North Node. Squares to the nodal axis are called skip steps. They are something that you didn't get right in a previous lifetime. This may not, or just don't come into this lifetime having right. You don't have that planetary energy right. There could be a, a misuse or abuse of that energy. There could be a neglect of that energy. There could be just an ignoring that energy. It's not necessarily that you did, and you know, where that square to the nodal axis falls by house will give you an idea of what area of life. By sign will give you an idea of how. The planet will give you an idea of what, right? What we're talking about. But there is something, usually this is some kind of trauma. Again, it doesn't have to be earth-shakingly, devastatingly bad. It can be, or difficult. It can be, though. It doesn't have to be. But there is something to work through there. There is something to work out there. And I do tend to think of it as some type of trauma that does need to be worked through. And this could be, we could be talking about any planet here, or planets. But that's another place I would look for trauma in the natal chart. So yeah, things having to do with the south node, conjunctions to the south node, and squares to the south and north nodes. I don't have a card for this one. Ceres. It's an asteroid. It tends to deal with nurturing and mothering and all of those kinds of things. Ceres, though, it can also show how we needed to be nurtured, how we needed to be mothered. That doesn't necessarily mean it happened for us the way that it should have. The whole chart would need to be considered here to know if that is the case or not. Because, like, I don't know, you could have Ceres making really nice aspects to everything, nice aspects or easy aspects to things, and you might have gotten what you needed, nurture-wise. So there might not be trauma with Ceres, but a lot of people don't get the nurturing and the mothering and the care that they need and that they needed when they were little, and there is trauma with Ceres. There are issues. So that we don't have a card for it. The only asteroid we really used in the star cards was Chiron. Eventually I'd like to do some asteroids. I'd like to include some asteroids, but definitely look, pull your Ceres, see where she falls in your chart. Because that'll give you an idea as to, like, if you weren't nurtured or mothered or cared for the way that you should have been, Ceres will give you some ideas as to how you can do this for yourself, how you can give yourself what you didn't have, which is often incredibly important for people that didn't get that kind of nurturing or mothering or care that they needed when they were younger, the way that they needed it. Specifically the way that they needed it. I mean, you could have somebody with like, I don't know, Ceres and Sagittarius who needed nurturing more through freedom, right? Through freedom and being able to go out there and explore the world. But maybe their parent, the way that they were mothered wasn't that way, or the way they were nurtured wasn't nurtured in them. Instead, they were nurtured. Maybe they had a mother that was more smothering, or more helicoptery, or what have you, and it just wasn't the way this person needed to be nurtured. So, leaning into Ceres in your chart will give you understanding. It will give you an idea of how you actually need to nurture yourself for yourself. It'll also show you how you tend to nurture other people. How you tend to do this. This is something that is, yeah, I think it's important. So definitely take a look and see where it is. If it happens to be conjunct a planet, that planet will flavor that nurturing a little bit, the sign it's in, how. But definitely take a look. Definitely take a look. Another place where there can be trauma is Black Moon Lilith. I'm specifically talking about Black Moon Lilith. I know there are multiple Liliths, but I'm specifically talking about Black Moon Lilith. The other Liliths are down here on the card. So, and some people prefer to use true Lilith or oscillating Lilith. Osculating Lilith. I always say oscillating, it's the wrong word. Osculating. Some people prefer to use this one. And that's fine too. Whatever you want to use. Black Moon Lilith and true Lilith or osculating Lilith tend to, they function very similarly. So whatever you want to use there is up to you. Sexuality, things dealing with sexuality, there can be trauma regarding sexuality in regards to Black Moon Lilith. There does not have to be. I'm certainly not saying that there has to be. You may not have any trauma in that area, but if there is any kind of sexual trauma, sexuality, anything like that, I would look at the 8th house, like I mentioned in the other video, but I would also look at Black Moon Lilith. The ways that we kind of, if you've ever felt like another one for Black Moon Lilith, feeling like you're being held down or repressed or, and you just want to say fuck you to all of that. If there's any trauma like that, Black Moon Lilith is also a place I would look. I would totally look at Black Moon Lilith for trauma stemming from feelings of that. But again, this may not be where you find that. It's just one of the places I would look. Like if I had a client that was, came to me and said they had like sexual trauma that they wanted to work through, or feeling like they're being held down by some kind of oppressive force. I would look at Black Moon Lilith. A little Black Moon Lilith too. It's kind of like a tongue twister. So yeah, those are some other places that I would definitely look at for trauma in the natal chart to try to help work through it. Focus on any aspects that are made, because the aspects will kind of, if there's trauma with any of these things that I mentioned or any of the things that I mentioned in the previous video, there'll probably be some aspects to kind of back that up if that's where the trauma comes from. Like if you think you might have some trauma with like some sex trauma or anything like that, Black Moon Lilith might be making some harsh aspects to things in your chart. I would look at what those are, so that you can work through those, if you will. Anyway, I'm gonna get going. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck With Astrology. I am at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Apaterno Astrology on Instagram. If you want to like or subscribe or whatever the fuck people do with videos on YouTube, you can find us by searching for Let's Fuck With Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck With Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.